In December 1904, the Oregonian published a shocking account from a participant in a sheep killing in Central Oregon. According to the account, a group of cattlemen spent the day watching a shepherd and waiting for the moment when he was alone and unarmed. Once they were certain he had no help nearby, they moved in. About a dozen masked riders surrounded the camp. They captured the shepherd and tied him to a tree. Then they drove roughly 2,000 sheep into a confined area. The participant later claimed that the riders knelt with their rifles so that each shot might pass through more than one animal. More than 1,500 rounds were fired. When it was over, about 1,200 sheep lay dead. The attack was not an isolated incident. It was part of a conflict that had been spreading across eastern Oregon for years. The violence traced back to the mid-1890s. Near the small community of Izee, west of John Day and north of Burns, cattlemen organized a group called the Izee Sheep Shooters. They posted warning signs across the range and marked trees with boundaries they called deadlines. The message was simple: keep sheep away. A flock that crossed the deadline could become a target. Soon, similar groups appeared across eastern Oregon. The attacks usually happened far from towns, where sheep camps were isolated and a lone herder had little protection. The violence spread. In 1903, near Benjamin Lake, north of Christmas Valley, nearly 2,400 sheep were killed in a single attack. Around Silver Lake, thousands more were killed in separate incidents. Over the course of the conflict, an estimated 12,000 to 25,000 sheep were slaughtered. Despite the scale of the violence, no human deaths were ever officially linked to the sheep wars. There were rumors of gunfights and shallow graves in the Ochoco Mountains. A sheep rancher named Shorty Davis disappeared in 1900, though no connection to the conflict was ever proven. In the end, no deaths were confirmed. Not a single sheep shooter was prosecuted. Not one was publicly identified. On December 13, 1904, a disturbing photograph appeared in the Oregonian. It showed the ground near Willow Creek covered with dead sheep. The caption was simple: "Scenes showing slaughtered sheep near Willow Creek, Central Oregon." The photograph showed the aftermath of the sheep wars. But the strange thing was not only what it showed, it was where it was taken. Near present-day Cecil, Oregon Trail emigrants once stopped at Willow Creek after crossing the Blue Mountains. In 1853, traveler John Murray camped here and described the valley of grass and water, a welcome stop before the final stretch west. The next day, he passed graves left behind by earlier travelers. Decades later, the same valley appeared in a photograph of a very different kind. After the wagon trains disappeared, ranchers spread across eastern Oregon. The grass that once fed emigrants' livestock now supported growing cattle operations. Much of the grazing land was public range, open to anyone who could reach it. Then sheep arrived in greater numbers. During the 1890s, railroads restricted access to some lands, and new forest reserves limited grazing in mountain areas that sheepmen had traditionally used. Thousands of sheep were pushed into eastern Oregon in search of new pasture. The open range grew crowded, and competition turned into conflict. Eventually, some cattlemen decided to enforce their own boundaries. By 1904, the conflict had grown beyond cattle versus sheep. Letters sent to Oregon's governor accused cattlemen of claiming sections of public land as their own and deciding who could graze there. At the center of the dispute was a simple question: who controlled the open range? Both sides depended on the same public land. Both believed they had a right to use it. The answer was not settled by courts or lawmakers. For years, it was settled on the range itself. The sheep wars ended when the open range itself began to disappear. In 1906, new federal grazing regulations divided public lands into controlled grazing areas. The old system, where cattlemen and sheep owners competed for the same grass, was gradually replaced by regulated grazing. With official boundaries in place, there was less reason for armed groups to enforce their own. The sheep wars faded away. The photograph did not. More than a century later, the photograph remains, a haunting record of how a valley that once welcomed travelers became a battleground on the open range. This was actually something I didn't know much about until someone made a comment on one of my videos asking me to do a video about it. And so that's why we learn more about the history of Oregon through your comments and suggestions. So keep the suggestions coming. Until our next video, take care.